The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Narrated by Alejandro Kafka. Book 1. The Story of a Certain Little Family. 1. Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov. Alexei Fyodorovich Karamazov was the third son of a landowner in our district. Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov, so noted in his time, and even now still recollected among us, for his tragic and fishy death, which occurred just 13 years ago, and which I shall now report in its proper context. All I shall say now about this landowner, as he was called among us, though for most of his life he hardly ever lived on his estate at all, is that he was a strange type, one that is, however, rather often encountered. Namely, the type of man who was not only empty and depraved, but also muddle-headed, belonging, though, to the class of muddle-headed men who are perfectly well able to handle their little property affairs, and, it would seem, these alone. Fyodor Pavlovich, for example, began with practically nothing, was a landowner of the very least important category when trotting around other people's dining tables, aspired to the rank of sponge, but at the moment of his decease turned out to possess something to the tune of 100,000 rubles in ready money. And yet at the same time he had persisted all his life in being one of the most muddle-headed madcaps in the whole of our district. I repeat, here there was no question of stupidity. The bulk of these madcaps are really quite sharp and clever, but plain muddle-headedness, and moreover of a peculiar national variety. He was married twice, and he had 3 sons, Dmitri Fyodorovich, the eldest, by his first spouse, and the other 2, Ivan and Alexei, by his second. Fyodor Pavlovich's first spouse came from a rather well-to-do and aristocratic tribe of gentlefolk, the Karamozovs, who were also landowners in our district. Just how it came to transpire that a girl with a dowry, who was also attractive and was, in our present generation, though not entirely absent from our last, moreover, one of those pert, clever girls, so frequently encountered, could have given her hand in marriage to such an insignificant weakling, as everyone called him, then I shall not labor to explain. You see, I once knew a certain young unmarried woman, back in the last romantic generation, who after several years of mysterious love for a certain gentleman, whom incidentally she could have taken to the altar at the time of her choosing, with a modicum of fuss, ended by inventing insuperable obstacles, and on a stormy night throwing herself from a lofty bank, resembling a cliff, into a rather deep and fast-flowing river, and perished in it, really for no other reason than her own caprice. Solely in order to emulate Shakespeare's Ophelia, and one might even say that had this cliff, so long ago selected and favored by her, been not so picturesque, and had there been on that site merely a flat, prosaic bank, then her suicide might possibly never have taken place at all. This is an authentic case, and one may suppose that in our Russian life, there has, over the past 2 or 3 generations, occurred no small number of such cases, or cases of a similar nature. As in those other instances, Adelaia Ivanov Miosov's behavior was without a doubt an echo of trends and ideas acquired elsewhere, and also the fretting of a captive mind. It may be that she wished to demonstrate her female independence, to protest against the conditions imposed on her by society, against the despotism of her blood and family. And, for a single instant, let us suppose her complacent imagination persuaded her that Fyodor Pavlovich, his rank of sponge notwithstanding, was none the less one of the boldest and most rapier-tongued men of that era, transitional as it was to all that was finest, while he was really only a nasty buffoon, and nothing more. Another piquant aspect of the marriage was the fact that it took place following an elopement. Ivanova had found this enticing, whereas Fyodor Pavlovich was concerned. His social position, at the time, made him thoroughly prepared for strange adventures of this kind, for he entertained a passionate wish to secure his future career by any means that lay to hand. When it came to sucking up to a good family and acquiring a dowry, this was a very alluring prospect. With regard to mutual love, it appears to have been entirely absent, both on the part of the bride and of himself, for all Adelia Ivanov's attractiveness. So it may have been that this incident was the only one of its kind in the life of Fyodor Pavlovitch. All his life, the most voluptuous-tempered of men, ready in a trice to cling to any skirt at all. No sooner did it lead him on, yet it appears that this woman alone failed to make any particular impression on him, for the most voluptuary point of view. Adelia Ivanov realized in a flash, immediately after the elopement, that she merely despised her husband, and that was all. In this fashion, the consequences of the marriage showed themselves with extreme rapidity, even though the family rather quickly came to regard the event as fait accompli and appointed the fugitive girl her dowry. The couple began together a disorderly existence that involved eternal scenes and rows. It was related that in the process of these, the young female spouse demonstrated an incomparably greater degree of good breeding and elevation than did Fyodor Pavlovitch, whom, as is now notorious, diddled her right there and then, in one fell swoop, out of all her wretched money, to the tune of 25,000, as soon as she received it, with the result that as far as she was concerned, from that day on, their dear little thousands might as well have sunk in the river. As for the small estate and the rather elegant town-house, which were also included in her dowry, for a long time he strove his utmost to have these transferred to his name by the formulation of some suitable deed, and would most likely have attained his end by the mere, as it were, contempt and revulsion he inspired in his spouse every moment with his shameless beggings and blackmailings, by the mere psychological exhaustion she endured, praying only that he would let her alone. Luckily, however, Adelia Ivanov's family entered the fray and placed a check on the marauder. It has been positively established that frequent fights occurred between the couple, but legend will have it that it was not Fyodor Pavlovitch who administered the blows, but Adelia Ivanov, a lady hot-blooded, audacious, dark-haired, impatient, and endowed with remarkable physical strength. At last she forsook the house and ran away from Fyodor Pavlovitch with a certain schoolteacher, a Cimmerian who was practically dying of poverty, leaving her 3-year-old son Mitya in the arms of her husband. In no time at all, Fyodor Pavlovitch had set up an entire harem in the house and begun to embark upon the most dissolute of drunken excesses, in the entourage of which be traversed very nearly the entire province, tearfully complaining to each and every one about his Adelia Ivanov's desertion, imparting as he did so details that it would be positively shameful for any married man to give about his conjugal life. The main thing was that he seemed to find it enjoyable and even flattering to act out before everyone the preposterous role of injured spouse, and even to depict with colorful additions the details of his injury.
Anyone think you'd got a promotion, Fyodor Pavlovitch? So pleased you are in spite of all your misfortune.
The mockers would say to him. Many would even add that in their opinion he enjoyed appearing to the revamped guise of a buffoon, and that he was purposely pretending, in order to intensify their mirth, not to be aware of the comical position in which he found himself. Who can tell, however? Perhaps it really was a genuine naivete on his part. Finally, he succeeded in uncovering the traces of his fugitive spouse. The poor thing was found to be in St. Petersburg, whither she had moved with her Cimmerian, and where she had wholeheartedly launched herself upon a process of the most complete emancipation. Fyodor Pavlovitch had once bestirred himself and set about making ready for the journey to St. Petersburg. For what reason? It hardly needs adding that he himself did not know. In truth, he might actually have gone, but having taken a decision of such moment, he at once considered himself peculiarly infanticized. For the sake of keeping up his spirits and for the road, to launch himself upon another most unbridled drunken excess, and then it was that the family of the spouse received the news of her death in St. Petersburg. She had died suddenly, in a garret somewhere, according to some, of typhus, according to others of hunger. Fyodor Pavlovitch learned of the death of his spouse while drunk. Some say that he went off racing down the street and began to shout, lifting his arms to the heavens in joy, "Lord, now lettest thou!" And others say that he sobbed violently like a small child to the point where it grieved one just to look at him. All the revulsions he inspired notwithstanding, it may very well be that both the one and the other took place. That is to say, that he exulted in his liberation and wept for his liberatress, both at the same time. In the majority of instances, human evildoers among them are far more naive and straightforward than we suppose, and that includes ourselves.